My name is Jennifer Zonas from New Canaan, and thank you so much for being here. And she's a tough act to follow because I think I'm different from anybody who else has come up here today. In that I stand with both of you is that I'm utterly confused and haven't made up my mind on this issue. And I think of myself as, being particularly up on the issues, and I've been trying to take in as much and very carefully. And I'm someone who was, quite categorically opposed in 2003 to Iraq. And I listened to the president's speech, and I actually, as I saw it with my children, I found it measured, and it made me stop and pause and say that I have to think this, more, just pay attention very carefully and know the facts. And I stand with him on the moral components of this issue regarding chemical warfare, and also, and I don't have to delineate it here, but the issues in regards to Iran, and what kind of statement we're making, and you guys can address that. But then this week, I followed that Senator McCain and Lindsey Graham had a meeting with him, and they said that they could be persuaded to vote for the resolution if the resolution involved more than just targeted attacks, but more of a strategy. And at the same time, I recall reading a cover story in the Times where a reporter had talked about the infiltration of Al-Qaeda and extremists into the rebel groups that McCain and Lindsey Graham were talking about, having a strategy for aiding them. And I just want to ask you, are you taking that into consideration? I mean, the biggest disaster, as far as I see it, is to go in and get involved and then turning Syria into another Pakistan situation. Can you address that, or at least take note that that's among my concern?
It has now come up 2 or 3 times, the nature of the rebellion against Assad. I had the opportunity 4 weeks ago to meet General Idris, who is the defecting general from Assad's army, who is coordinating the rebels with whom we are working and backing. But it is an unbelievably fragmented rebellion. You have Kurds who are feeling Syria is a combination of Kurds and Shiites, Christians, Sunnis, a very complicated ethnic makeup. You have Kurds in the northeast who are sort of establishing themselves in different areas. You also have Syria acting as a magnet for radical extremists who have been in Pakistan, have been in Europe and whatnot. Remember, Turkey is an EU country, meaning that European passports move through Europe and into Turkey, and once you're in Turkey, you step over a line and you're in the fight. So one of the very difficult aspects of this consideration is that it's not just the good rebels and al-Nusra. Al-Nusra was mentioned earlier. It's an organization that has ties to Al-Qaeda, radical Islam. It is actually a good deal more complicated than that. There are all sorts of groups running around. Of course, Hezbollah, which is an Iranian client, Shiite based in Lebanon, is there backing the regime, and you have all of these other freelance rebels of unknown provenance and unknown motivations that are in the mix in Syria.
Jim is absolutely right. It is extraordinarily complicated and fluid. Jennifer, the question you asked is an excellent one because it is a civil war, and certainly I have to consider, and I know Jim does as well, what military action involves in potentially entangling us in a civil war. And we have to consider what military action means in potentially entangling us in an extraordinarily complicated and fluid and changing, fast-changing civil war. It is a civil war. And let me just add a note.
It's not a civil war. 90% of the rebels are not Syrians.
Okay.
It's not a civil war.
And that point is correct, that some proportion of the rebels are from outside of Syria. But here's a point that hasn't been mentioned so far, and it's a profoundly important humanitarian point, one that I've made before. I have visited the region twice with John McCain, and actually Afghanistan 3 times, and
You know, one of our visits was to a refugee camp on the border of Jordan. And at that point, there were tens of thousands of people. Now there are probably more than 150,000 in the Zatari camp. I may be wrong on these statistics. I've seen them publicly. About 10% of the Syrian people are now in refugee camps. And 30% of the population has been displaced. The question that hasn't been addressed, to my satisfaction, is what the impact will be in creating more refugees, more humanitarian impacts as a result of military action that potentially could destroy facilities and homes and other areas where civilians would be further displaced. The humanitarian crisis there, I think we have an obligation to address, whatever we do on the resolution. We should be providing more medical supplies. I've advocated this for some time. Food, educational facilities, and so forth for those refugee camps, and addressing the humanitarian crisis that exists.
Let's move outside to the mic out there.